Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Welcome back to Time to Teach, and as promised, we have the one and only Miss Aimee Buchanan joining us today on the show. She is the instructional math coach at our school. So Aimee, if you don't mind, would you just start by introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is Aimee Buchanan. I've been at our school for 7 years. I'm beginning my 8th year here in Guadalajara, Mexico.
And what exactly do you do in your position?
So I'm the math coach. Primarily, I work with elementary, helping our teachers implement our Singapore math program, but really that's taken on many forms with instruction, helping teachers improve instructional strategies in their classroom. I also work in early childhood, middle school, and even 9th grade.
You have a heavy load, my dear.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask this because this whole idea of international teaching, which is not the topic, but the audience, they're really kind of intrigued by this. Would you share, how has your experience been with the whole aspect of international teaching?
Well, I taught for 6 years in the States in public school, and this was my first venture teaching elementary school abroad. I had taught in Barcelona, I had taught in Grenoble, France, and I'd done some volunteer teaching in London, England. So I had experiences abroad, but I hadn't taught at the elementary level.
What were you teaching?
I was teaching English.
Oh, okay.
Teaching abroad. So, but I was very interested in getting back into teaching as far as your academic subjects, math, and
aside from
reading
just
and writing.
English.
Yeah, and having children again, like full time. So I applied for a job here because my husband, well, my fiance at the time, was living in Guadalajara and is from Guadalajara. And I applied for a position here, and it was a 3rd grade position, which was where my previous public school experience had been. So it was a perfect fit. And I have to say that, it continues to be a perfect fit for me and now my family, my 2 children, and my husband, just because I've grown a lot working at this school. I started as a 3rd grade teacher and then moved into the position of math coach. And while I thought I wasn't qualified perhaps enough to be the math coach at a school of our size and our caliber, I've learned that I love learning, and I love learning to teach better, if you will. And so sharing that passion, I think, just through learning independently and on my own, I've been able to do my job hopefully well, Miss Tammy.
I can definitely confirm that Miss Aimee has done a fantastic job, and I'm sure you see now that you are more than qualified.
Thank you. No, but I think that teaching here has been a huge blessing.
Okay, so
having the wonderful work climate, really, but then weathered climate is an added bonus. Yeah, I just feel extremely blessed. It's kind of a low pressure work environment, and so
I agree, and I feel like we're often very much spoiled by this experience, because I know it's just a different experience in terms of there's more flexibility, I feel. And it's just, that's why I always tell everyone I'm on the no plan, because that's what I'm on. I have no plans right now to return because I'm really enjoying this experience.
Yeah, me too. I almost get anxiety or a little panic attack when I think that what if we have to go back? Where will I start and where will I be?
It's scary when you've been here so long. It's almost the reverse, where when you initially move to a foreign country, that's so new and exciting, but also a little bit scary, and like, how will I live there and how will things be? But then when you think about going back home after you've been here so long, because I'm now going into my 9th year, not at this school, my 6th year here at the school, but 9th year in Guadalajara, it's slightly terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like starting over, basically.
Yeah, totally.
It really is.
And with children, because I have 2 children, and I think that they've never lived there.
Yeah.
You know, how would I do all of that?
Yeah.
And be a good teacher too.
Okay, so let's start talking a little bit about homework, because I thought you, Miss Aimee, would be the perfect one, because you were so instrumental in helping our elementary section with revamping the way that we do homework. Last year, audience, just to kind of give you a little bit of the backstory, but last year was our first year that we really looked at our own homework practices and thought, how can we make our homework more meaningful for students and for parents, and really kind of move away from the way we had traditionally done homework and the way I feel like many schools have done it and probably continue to do it. And Aimee was really the one who opened up that conversation, and like I said, was very instrumental. So I guess, Aimee, I'd like to ask you, what you brought it to our section's attention. What were the reasons why you brought it to our attention, or what was the backstory in that?
That's a great question. The backstory actually came from working with struggling students during tutoring sessions. After beginning my time here, I was sought after as a tutor, and I started working, obviously, with students who struggled with math. And they would come to me, and I would have kind of an agenda of things that I knew that they were studying, units that they were studying in math. And instead of wanting to listen to what I had to offer as far as teaching, I found that many of my students were coming with 20 problems of a worksheet, and the parents were saying, hey, can you just help my child do this homework? And I thought, well, that's not really tutoring, is it? Isn't that kind of helping with homework? But what I found during this experience were 2 things. Number one was that a lot of homework was being assigned that students weren't ready for. They weren't prepared for. They didn't have the skills, whether it be through the lesson or through the unit, to do homework independently. They needed somebody next to them, guiding them, helping them, just teaching them, basically. So that kind of sparked or raised a concern in my mind. As a teacher, I'd always assigned homework, but I've never had the experience of sitting with the child after school.
Being on the other side and witnessing it from that viewpoint.
Right. And because parents really just wanted their children to get the mark for turning the homework in, parents at times weren't even so concerned with, can you really help my child understand this? It was more of, can you help my child do this, finish it? And what I did, a couple sessions, kind of sat back, and I told my students, I said, I want you to work on this completely by yourself for a bit. And I'm just going to sit off to the side, and that's going to feel weird because usually I help you, but I'm just going to watch you for a bit. And my students had online assignments using IXL. And at the time, the teachers were asking that students achieve a 100 SMART score, okay? And if you're familiar with IXL or not familiar,
I've heard of it, but not familiar with it.
A teacher will assign a set of problems based on a certain concept. The students log in, and as they start to answer questions or solve problems successfully, their score increases. And it increases. Maybe the questions get a little bit more challenging along the way. But as soon as they make a mistake or answer something incorrectly, the score drops or decreases like exponentially. So if it was increasing by 5 with every correct answer, with one incorrect answer, it might drop 15 or 20 points. So children who struggle already with a math concept, they were so hopeful when they would get to finally, after maybe 30, 40 minutes, to a 70, and they still had to reach that 100, and then suddenly they would be presented with a problem.
Was that, they have to reach that 100 right then at that, before the next day? Was that the homework assignment?
Yeah, that would generally be the homework assignment.
So they could not be finished with that homework assignment until they got to 100.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it sounds like with these questions, they're just questions. There's no, they're not, it's just basically showing if they know it or not.
Yeah.
And they have to have 100.
Yes.
So if they don't know it, out of luck, basically.
Now, some teachers were saying 15 minutes or a 100 SMART score, but some, how students are, sometimes they hear that message.
Yeah.
And sometimes that message gets lost.
Yeah.
And so these particular students, although the teachers had said, oh, we said 15 minutes, or some students, especially even struggling students, can be perfectionists. They know that their classmates were getting 100, that was the goal, that was what the teacher really wanted. One child in particular, she had dressed herself for ballet, and she hadn't achieved the 100. She couldn't achieve the 100, and she cried, and her mom said, honey, you need to stop. You need to go to dance class. And she just sat there for 3 hours trying to get the 100. And so it was this combination of experiences of me sitting with students who struggle, who were being assigned maybe what seemed reasonable to a teacher, 20 problems, 15 problems, something like that. But for these children who just weren't prepared to sit independently and achieve or finish correctly this work, and especially when it's linked to a computer, where it had to be right for them to move on or to get credit, I saw it just being not a learning experience.
Yeah.
It didn't extend or deepen or enrich what was happening in the classroom. It just really made these children down on themselves, and obviously not engaging in things like ballet, which is something that they were passionate about. I just really started to become concerned about what children were doing.
Yeah, and it sounds like with something like this or any traditional math homework that goes out, if you know it, great, but you also probably wouldn't lose anything by not doing it either, right? Like, you know it, so you're answering it correctly, and you can quickly get up to that percentage because you're fine. So you don't lose out if you didn't do it. But then that student who is really struggling and they don't know the concept apparently, and they need something instructionally different, or maybe the way they work with it differently, they're maybe the biggest losers in this, because it's not, to me it sounds like that's not appropriate, because they don't know it, so they can't do it. So after you saw this and you became concerned, then I remember we had a meeting. I think we had a couple of meetings, right? About the homework. Was it at the beginning of last year? Well, I guess it.
Okay, so actually it was about 4 school years ago.
Oh, okay.
I was walking through the library and there was a book on display. If we could go back a little bit.
Okay, 4 years, sorry, not last year?
1 year at a time. I will not go into that detail. But the book, The Case Against Homework, was sitting out on display in the library.
Do you know the author of that, The Case Against? And audience, I will put this in the show notes too, so that will be available. Any of the resources that we discussed today that will be important, I will go ahead and include that. So so The Case Against Homework, Sarah Bennett and Nancy Kellish. Okay.
So how homework is hurting children and what parents can do about it. And I think it was perfect timing because like I said, it was on display, so I wasn't looking to read about this topic necessarily, but when it was on display, it found me, and I took it out of the library, borrowed it, and started reading it, and I had this epiphany, perhaps, this light bulb moment. Number one, I was kind of humbled, and this is one of the things I often share as a math coach. A lot of things I did as a teacher in the past, I'm humbled now because I wouldn't do those things now because I've learned, and that's what this journey of
And I'm sure, I'm sure there were good intentions.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, I think most of us teachers, we have good intentions, but like you're saying, you never saw the other side.
Never saw the other side. And so it's kind of a gift to tutor children, and I have such a love of children, for children. Like, I really care for their well-being, and I want them to be happy. I mean, you only have one childhood, and school takes up a big part of it, and school is a wonderful experience for many. It's a very challenging experience for some, and for many as well. And to just increase that struggle by adding on this time after
and
school.
they need that time to be children. They need that time, and I don't know. I think when I think about our specific student population, these kids are busy.
Yes,
I mean, they are so busy with their after-school activities. Sometimes I listen to what they're doing, and I'm like, I'm not that busy, which I'm probably not the best example because I don't have much of a life. So anyone is busier than I am, but I'm just like,
They're always
but these kids really do. I mean, some of them have several different activities outside of the school day.
And some of those activities, those children are extremely passionate about. One of the things I say every year is that the talent show happens to be one of my most favorite days of the school year. It's also Children's Day. But aside from being Children's Day, because we get to see that so-and-so, the little guy who is our biggest challenge in the classroom. Oh, he plays the drums and he is a rock star, and something that you never, it's like you see them for something else. They might always be known to their classmates or even to the teacher as, that kid, just never gets it and needs extra time. And they're only known for what they can do in the classroom, but they have passions outside of school and talents outside of school. And when you kind of relieve them of this second shift, as we commonly say, like, why are we forcing children to do a second shift? Then it frees them up to follow their passions, which luckily our children have access to, developing those passions, where maybe in other schools or other communities, I know it's often the concern that the children will go home and play video games, or watch TV for 6 hours if they don't have homework. But I would argue that that's not true. It might be true in some cases, some of the time, but in this community, I think it would be very few and far between. And it would just free up the children to go outside and play with their neighbors and develop social relationships, sit down to dinner with their family, be responsible for chores.
That was one of the things on my previous episode. Actually, I'm going to say 2 episodes because I snuck in a bonus episode. You're welcome, audience. Just kidding. They don't care. But that was something that when I interviewed my sister that we talked about, and that was one of the things that she felt like homework was difficult from a parent's perspective, but the thing that she did like was that it builds in a responsibility at home, so she liked that. And then I also added that that was a great point, but also that there are other ways to do that as well.
And that's
one way.
What that book and many other books state it, but The Case Against Homework gives a nice parental perspective about so many people feel so strongly that homework, and my passion really is at the elementary level as far as homework is concerned. So just to be clear, but that homework develops responsibility and teaches responsibility. I think if homework is the only thing you have, in your...
Then we maybe should reevaluate and think about what other ways we can establish that. That's true. And especially when we take into consideration that's something we just got out of a grade level leader meeting, and we were just talking about this very fact that how do you get kids to do homework at home? Miss Amy, how do you do that?
I'm not sure how.
You can't, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we only control what, we have some things that we have control over within our immediate environment. Here in my classroom, it's reading time, And even that is not 100% because the kid who looks like, he or she's reading maybe isn't. So, we can only control what we can control, but outside of the school, you cannot control what happens at home. So there's got to be other ways that, if it happens to be a student who has difficulties completing homework, there's got to be other ways to establish responsibility.
Exactly.
So yeah,
100%. I agree with that. And I think Alfie Kahn was the one who said that it's very noble for teachers to want to control, like, what happens.
Everything.
I know I teach them for 7 hours, but I'd really like to extend their learning for an additional 3 hours after school to keep them safe and to teach them responsibility at home. That's a noble role that many teachers take on, but your day ends at 2:30.
But you're done.
Yeah.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Yeah, no, seriously.
No, I completely understand that. And again, going back to the good intentions, I know we teachers have the best intentions, but I think also once we can accept that, hey, this is all I can control, it takes off the pressure too, because you realize I ultimately can't make that happen. We just can't. So I think part of it is also realizing I just can't. It's impossible, and it takes off that that little bit of pressure that we might have. Now, is there any more to your backstory before you want to talk about?
So about 4 years ago, I actually presented, after I'd read this book, kind of shared what I'd read with the principal here, and said, have you ever thought about this? And actually the principal, from her own parental experiences with her children, had some pretty awful stories to tell about nights where she, as a principal, returned home from school at 9 p.m. and her son might be sitting there struggling, and they still had to continue on, with the homework to get it done. And so she 100% agreed. She had a fear that the parents, being the institution that we are, have expected homework and they just wouldn't go for it. So that really wasn't the right time. And as the years progressed, I think more and more people were writing about this topic. There were more books being published, and I started picking them up because I was so passionate about it. I really didn't think that it was that maybe the school would kind of shift their perspective as far as what the parents would come to expect at a school like ours. But I thought, you know what, I've had several teachers and parents themselves come to me. I don't know why, maybe because they knew this was a topic I was interested in, but seeking me out to kind of engage in a conversation about homework and their own frustrations or thoughts about it. And I thought, you know what, maybe it's time to just represent it, to put it back on the table. And I think the time was right, because the principal said, I think that we're ready, and if you could maybe begin the conversation. And so that's where it took off.
And that's, I guess, the part that I remember, because hearing you share the story, I was not included in any of those things that happened 4 years ago. So of course I would not know anything about it. So that is interesting to hear the backstory, because really it was a progression.
It was.
It wasn't like it just happened overnight.
Well, and one of the things I've learned, I forget who said it, but it's one of those things that stuck with me. Sometimes the timing's not right.
Yeah.
And we just give up, because I was told no, 3 years prior. I thought, the school, that's just something the school will never go for. But then I thought, you know what, I heard someone say, it's not the idea that's bad, it's the timing that's wrong. And so if you wait a little while, come back to it, revisit it, maybe the timing will be right. So I just thought, I'm gonna present it again, just something to explore, and the timing happened to be right.
Well, I, for one, and I think that I can speak for many teachers, I, for one, am so grateful. I mean, I just remember sitting in that meeting when, this is the meeting where we were in the library, not that the audience needs to know where we were, or they have no visual of that, but we were in the library, and I just very vividly remember that day, because I, forever, basically, have disliked homework, really have disliked it, and have felt that there are better ways to do homework, but part of it was we were expected to give homework and parents want homework. So it's been a very uncomfortable situation because you feel like, we can do this better, but you're also very limited because of those expectations and sometimes those mandates that are given, making it very difficult. So I think I was just so happy when I heard that, okay, this is what we're thinking about as a section. And I was very excited. So that is what we did across the grades. And like you said, in elementary, we're speaking just our elementary section. We have 4 sections. Now, after you shared it, can you maybe speak a little bit to maybe the teachers' reactions to this?
I hate to maybe guess at a percentage, but I think that overall, a lot of people were receptive to it because they did share a lot of the research.
Which was helpful.
Without talking too much about it here, I shared a lot of the research and the parent perspective and just the whole child perspective. What is good for children? Sleep is good for children. Having the amount of sleep that's needed for a child, which is more than what's needed for an adult, that's important for a developing brain. Social interaction is important. Playing outside, being in the sun, developing relationships with the people who live around you, sitting down for family dinner, all of these things contribute to academic achievement at the elementary level. Well, beyond that, but I'm just saying, homework is not something that increases or academic achievement at the elementary level. Children just aren't independent enough to come home, sit down, read directions, and complete a task and all the rest. So if we take a look at the whole child, as I shared that with teachers, I felt like there was an aha moment kind of for them, like I had when I started reading about this topic more. And that was really good. Now, on the other hand, there are many concerns because we have a dual program.
Yeah.
And the amount of time that we have to teach is lessened as far as the English program and then the Spanish program. And I think the Spanish program suffers the most. So in a program that's already limited with time, and then you take the homework component away.
Can I ask you something about that? Because every time I hear that as an argument, which, that's always a concern. And I think we all get that in this specific kind of school, we are limited because of the 2 programs. So our time, we're teaching less time than maybe teachers in the States who there's only 1 program. But when I hear and maybe I'm wrong, and this is why I'm genuinely just very interested. When I hear that as an argument, I still wonder, but so what is the homework? Is there homework being used to extend that teaching time? Okay. And then in that case, that's where I would be concerned.
So, and that's actually the first thing that I have an issue with when that is brought up as a concern, because either we need to re-look at what we're offering, what we say we're offering. Does that make sense? Because if the teacher is using homework as a teaching time, are they expecting the parents to teach the child the material? What is it? Because I feel like that's unique to maybe our school,
to our school. But I would maybe say, I wonder, I don't know if that's happening in the States. My guess is that in some cases that could be, but I think you're right. I think that issue is possibly unique to our specific school, but I would say probably not necessarily exclusive. I'm going to guess that there are some of that happening.
Okay. Yes. Now, I read something that I'd like to share with people, and I hate to misquote on your podcast here, okay, but this is a TIIMS study, TIIMS. So the TIIMS and PISA.
Okay. Yes, okay. I'm familiar with
So this
PISA.
is a research study done a number of years ago. Basically, they do international ratings of schools around the world, obviously, international, and what they did is they went into classrooms, and this was regarding math, but they took a look at students who were in the classroom for like a 45-minute math lesson per day, up to students who were in the classroom for an hour and a half a day. And they found that students in the classroom for an hour and a half performed no better than students who were in the classroom for 45 minutes. The number one factor that determined where students fell as far as their mathematics, academic achievement, was the amount of on-task time. So the longer that students were engaged in math when they were in the classroom, the better they achieved. Does that make sense? The more successful they were.
Not necessarily the amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the higher percentage of time students are on task or engaged in a math activity, whether it be problem solving or sometimes it's a skill set. You know, we have to teach sets of skills sometimes in math, of course. But when engagement is high, academic achievement is increased. So I always think about this research study when teachers argue about the amount of time they have to teach. Because what I find, teachers like to talk, myself included, you know that. Teachers generally are talkers.
Yeah,
and
this is true.
When we tighten up the lesson, or really, pre-assessing our students is important, and I'll be the first to admit that oftentimes I go into a classroom and teach a lesson to the whole group just expecting that everyone's going to be where, they need to know, I need to impart this knowledge to everyone, right? But if we actually made better use of our time with our students and take formative assessment data to kind of inform our instruction, we'll teach students where...
Can I just say, I was on just interviewed on another podcast, and that was one of my big things that I said, his question, Brad Schreffler from Planning Period podcast asked me, what do you think all teachers should be doing? That was my big thing. That I think that's what we have to be doing is the formative assessment and continuously gathering data, but not just gathering it to gather it because that's so fun to gather, but because you can honestly figure out your next steps.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's, whether it's a next step for a struggling student or it's a next step for a student who's gotten that, but they, can benefit from moving beyond. Maybe that's they've already met that goal, so it's the next goal for them. That was my big thing. That was my very big thing, I think.
Well, and we could take children a lot further. And at the right pace, right? The more that we know about students. Now, I'm not going to lie, all of that takes great organizational skills and time and dedication.
It's not easy.
It's not easy, and it is easier to teach whole group.
Yeah. But I would add that after you do it and you start teaching, and I air quote that nobody can say teaching because another thing I feel is teaching doesn't equate to student learning. So teaching could be the activities that you're designing and students are learning during those activities.
Yeah. Well, that's what I found. I'm so impressed with so much of the instruction that happens here at our school, but
it's really a shift in how do we move from teaching to putting the focus on student learning. But granted, any place there's room for improvement. Even the best teacher, there's room for improvement.
Well, that's why I say that my job is very humbling, because a lot of teachers look to me as a model, and I don't really see myself that way. I think that, I have a passion just like many of us do for instruction. But I'll be the first to kind of criticize myself after I walk out of a lesson thinking, oh dear, that wasn't what I had in mind.
But then that's great.
Yeah. No,
that's a reflective piece, because I think, who hasn't? I think we're being dishonest if we say that every lesson, and it feels scary, and especially when maybe someone else was in your room to witness everything fall apart and you're like, oh my goodness, that's not a representation of what happens on a daily basis, but you came in on a really bad day where I thought this would work. But I think that reflective piece is what we need to improve. That's how we're going to improve it.
No, that's kind of the only way that we'll improve. Well, it's good because even this conversation alone, I get to share with you that backstory that you didn't know.
That's right.
But some of the resources too.
Yes.
What kind of changed my perspective.
Yeah.
Being a mother as well.
Yeah.
I have, my children are young, so we haven't had to really sit down with the homework thing.
Yeah.
But there's been a little bit of homework, and something that I know teachers thought this would take 3 minutes, when a child is like, Mommy, I think I want to teach Eliana how to ride a bicycle right now. And you're like, oh no, honey, you have to color 7 squares. You just think to yourself,
Yeah, and it goes back to the teacher had the best intention, but like Absolutely. You're saying, we as teachers don't necessarily anticipate sometimes that an activity that we think is going to be, or a homework assignment that's going to be very quick, ends up taking a lot longer. So it's that, that consciousness part to it. So you presented, we revamped, you said mostly teachers were, positive responses, but there was the question of, but we have this time constraint, and that makes it difficult. Did you see any on the parent side? Do you know anything about how the parents responded to this new style? And maybe let me just back up and say some of the new things. I don't know what all the teachers have been doing, but I can speak to first that we just basically, math ended up being optional, and they're more like math games and activities, make 10 or how many sets of, whatever, things like that, making it more hands-on in activities and optional. And that reading is not considered homework, but it's required. So basically the focus, that needs to be what students are doing. But it's not called homework, but it is required. So that's how we changed it up. From what I understand, the other grade levels, they did similar things like math games. So math was no longer going home as a traditional math sheet. They were math games, but only maybe when the student requested it, or when the teacher saw that, you could benefit from doing a little more practice with this concept in this way. Anything else that you saw from?
I think in a perfect world, you described what we would have liked to have seen happen.
Okay.
I think that coming back to kind of what I shared about that research study about the amount of time, I felt like even those teachers with the best intentions of, I'm not going to send homework home, I think came to a crossroads where they started feeling like, kids weren't practicing this set of skills. Like maybe it was, as an example, like long division in 3rd grade, let's say. And I'm just throwing this out there as a hypothetical, but let's just say I only had 2 days to teach it, but we need long division, solid, to kind of move forward. And the teachers were like, what do I do? What do I do? And slowly homework started creeping up as a little option. The little 10 problems as a worksheet, perhaps, or something like that. So I did notice some students kind of huddling around one another in the library at times during recess to get finished their homework. And I thought, well, that's peculiar. So I think while the beginning of the year started on a very positive note, where we struggled perhaps, and what needs to be addressed is what happens when, and how do we allow time for that independent practice or development, skill development, or even that parent communication piece of, we've been working on long division. Give these 3 problems to sit down with your child and do these 3 problems over the week and talk about how they solved them, or something like that. These little alternatives that wouldn't be 20 problems, that's where we can grow, because I did see homework starting to creep up in places throughout the year when I thought to myself, is this what we agreed upon? But I always say, when teachers aren't doing something that maybe was expected, or did we give them the right option of alternatives,
Yeah. I think it's probably difficult if you feel like you're in that situation where you don't really know how to proceed. Maybe you just kind of fall back on those things that you do know and things that you've done. I can definitely see that. So clearly this is a work in progress. We are still working on revamping our homework and making it more meaningful and finding those ways to do that successfully. And it's an ongoing, thing that we're working on. What about parents? Did you get any feedback or heard any feedback?
The only feedback I received from parents personally was positive.
Oh, that's great.
Just that, oh my goodness, this just allows us to do this without worrying about the homework. A lot of children were doing homework in the car, in between sports and things like that, which really limits the conversations parents are having with children.
Yeah, it's more like we got to get this done.
We have to get this done, and I'm sure you have memories of it, or sometimes even being guilty of it as a student. If a teacher was just expecting it to be finished, some children just write an answer down, just to write an answer down, right? Because the teacher doesn't even value the homework enough to check to see if my answers are right. They just check to see that it's done. Yeah, and I would say, if I can interject there, that I strongly believe if you're giving something out, it's got, if it's valuable enough to send out, it's got to be, you got to look at it. Yeah. Because what is the message that and that was one of the struggles that I had with when I was being mandated to send homework out. I would have to look at it because I felt like that was the fair thing to do. I didn't record it though. There was a time, especially here, we in Pre-First are very fortunate. We have TAs, and it takes a valuable time that TAs could be working with students, or that you could be working with students. And obviously this shouldn't be happening during class time, but like if you do have a TA, a lot of that paperwork stuff, it ultimately is going to be done when it should be student contact time, which I think is the number one thing that should be happening. That's the priority, is students and the contact time and working with them. But if you're sending it out, you've got to look at it. Right. And what I found was that teachers were doing one or the other. They either weren't looking at it at all because they were worried. Those concerns, like did the child do it independently, or did they do it with a parent or a tutor? So since I don't know, I'm just gonna I'm not even gonna look at it. I'm not even gonna count it. I might check it off that they did it, but let's forget about the homework, because I just don't know, how many of them did it by themselves and whatnot. And then other teachers were like, okay, I sent it home. I have the expectation that they did it, so we're going to go over the homework every class period. And you have some kids who are wanting to gnaw off their wrist because I did this last night, I got them all right, and now we're taking 10 more minutes to go over all these problems. Are you kidding me? And I think, okay, well that's 10 minutes of instructional time lost, and most of the kids got everyone right. The kids who didn't aren't paying attention, so they're not gaining anything from this experience. It's almost like at that point you want to focus on, if clearly a student didn't understand something, that might be a one-on-one, that might be a small group, especially if it's a shared concept between several students. But I agree with you. If we're supposed to be sending out homework that's practice of what they already know, first of all. Yeah. So that's almost a complete waste of time to go over and spend extra instructional time on things that they have just done, and it's practice of what they know. Yes. So it seems, Yeah, and all of that kind of made sense to me after reading about this topic, even though teachers, that's just kind of how we were raised. You send homework home, and you get hired at a school and we send homework home. You do what you know. You just do what you know. So it made perfect sense to me that we do send homework home, and 20 problems sounds reasonable. And then I learned through my own experiences that 20 problems is never reasonable. You know what I'm saying? You can tell from 4 or 5 problems, sometimes less, if a child knows material or doesn't. So why just make them kind of practice endlessly a set of problems they already know how to solve? And why reinforce bad habits when the child has misunderstandings? Exactly. And then they're not going to learn from doing that sheet that they're struggling with. Yeah.
and that's clearly there's something that the student still needs. There's some kind of deficit, or it just needs to be introduced differently, or somehow practiced differently, and that. So as they're sitting there struggling through it without someone who can actually give them what they need, it has no benefit to them. No benefit. Well, Miss Aimee, so what would you suggest? Let's say a teacher is really interested in really revamping the way that they do homework in their classroom. What would be maybe your biggest piece of advice about how to go about this? And then maybe even if you want to invite others along with you on this exciting revamping homework journey.
Well, although I'm a math coach, reading is obviously super important.
Yes,
when we say, taking away homework, revamping homework, reading should never go away.
No.
Parents, with young children, but not just young children, need to spend time with their children reading. And I'll be the first to say that I do not read with my children every night. And I don't see that, we all parent differently, but I don't see it as a bad thing, because what I do, I'm a very hands-on mother and parent, and so some nights we're outside, and like last night, my G was on her bike for well over an hour, because she's just learned to ride the bicycle, and in between it all, I had made cookies, chocolate chip cookies with Eliana, and so we're measuring out. She can tell you all the ingredients. She knows when to do everything. And she's 3.5, and I'm setting the timer for 10 minutes to go in and change the cookies, in the oven, but running outside with G on her bike. And so last night, actually we did read a book, but there are some nights where you don't get to reading. But hopefully,
but you're doing other things. And I definitely can vouch for when you do upload pictures and I see the activities you do with your kids. I'm like, oh my goodness. And those things are important.
They're super important.
Those experiences are so important. And they're learning experiences too. Not everything you do is going to be because I'm going to learn something,
No. And children need downtime too. Just like adults need downtime. You need time to just decompress. And so even if it's watching a television show together, it's super silly, but even my husband will sit down and we'll watch like Fuller House with the kids.
But it's bonding time. That's important.
We talk about the characters. We kind of, you're Ramona and Papa's Fernando. Like we pretend, right? And so even television, while many people may say, I can't believe you let your watch.
Actually, do you listen to Gretchen Rubin?
No.
Happier? Oh my goodness, you need to listen to her most recent episode, because that's exactly what her topic was. She didn't publish it this morning. I listened to it. It's probably who knows when the audience is listening to this, but I'll add it to my show notes, because actually her topic was about how to connect with others through TV, and it was like finding a show that maybe the other person likes and use that as a time to bond. She talked about how with her teenage daughters that even though she's really not into their shows, she sits down and she watches it with them, because that is a very important family time and bonding time. So as you're saying I'm like, whoa.
Talks about that in his book.
Okay.
Because I remember sharing that. I believe it's Alfie Kohn. It might be somebody else, but it comes up in many scenarios. That I remember sharing that with the staff, and everyone laughed, but I was dead serious. I said, Juan Pablo, my husband, and I really don't have anything in common. We don't. Yeah. We have an attraction for each other. He makes me laugh hysterically. We have fun together. We have this deep love for one another.
But and you have children.
And we have children
together.
Yeah. We have that in common.
That's a big one. But in terms of interest,
he's into extreme sports.
Yeah.
Trying to get me, to become a skateboarder. I'm 38. No, I'm not going to become a skateboarder at 38 years old.
Come on, Miss Aimee. I want to see you on a skateboard.
And he has all these interests that are great for him, but it's just not something. But I love to shop. He's of course goes out here shopping. So what's our common bond? It's our children.
Yeah.
or television. And so when we find a show, whether it's like Breaking Bad or different shows. Right now we're watching Bloodline, and we find a show and we look forward to that time together, and we talk about the episodes as you naturally do. That's bonding too. And so sometimes we don't give, television enough credit, which sounds a little silly. We know that people watch television. We know people watch a lot of television. If we can use it just like books as that bonding time, then
exactly.
It's a bad thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, especially after, this is the second time I'm hearing this today, so someone's trying to send me a message. Maybe because I've recently have given up TV life. I'm so obsessed with my podcast. That's all I do now, but, and that's something I'm thinking.
But that's something people bond over too.
Yeah, true.
I was just thinking, when we talk about a book with somebody, a lot of the books I read are because of a recommendation. Somebody's like, I was just reading, like if I listen to this Gretchen Rubin, it's because you mentioned her.
Right.
Like, that sounds like something I like.
I'm going to send you that episode, by the way.
Television's the same, books are the same.
It's just another, another way to bond. So it's not, maybe that's necessarily exclusive to TV, but anything like that. But it was just funny that you specifically brought up TV, because that was something that was mentioned today. So I'm going to try to sift through all of that. So your piece of advice for teachers was...
or parents.
Parents, sorry.
I know. That's me too.
I'm going to be a sifter right now.
3-hour episode. Yeah. Please edit and I'll see this out. This has just been good conversation.
No, it has. That's the point of it.
But obviously the reading, like I said, is so important. But then spending time with your children, taking things like cooking or baking with your children. There's so much to be learned through cooking or baking. My children got into knitting, even though I'm not a knitter, but I was reading a lot about how knitting contributes to like math, like a math mind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just how it's awesome. It's awesome. Counting the stitches, doing the patterns, measuring out the
something
yarn.
That you wouldn't necessarily think math, but I think there's so much things that we probably don't directly relate. And we have another teacher here at our school who last year there was a whole lot of knitting going on. Well, knitting our trees. I don't know the origins of that. But,
what actually happened when she kind of brought that to school, as people got on board with it, I just quickly started doing a little research.
That's where your interest for that came?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I said, don't you have to count the stitches? And isn't there a pattern involved when you make things, following directions? There's so many, it touches on so many things, but then there's actually research out there. And so I forwarded a bunch of articles to her, and I said, I would love to see this during math as like one of your centers.
Yeah.
And here's the reason why. And so if anyone were to say, is that really appropriate during math time, or is that really appropriate during the school day? It's so wonderful when you can give them all the benefits that something that you're doing in the classroom has, right? And traditionally we did so many worksheets, or parents wanted to see this being.
And the skills that they're developing over the knitting is so much more than, I'm going to guess, what they can accomplish with a worksheet. Now, I'm not demonizing every worksheet. We've had that conversation. We know that there are appropriate times, and and sometimes it's good to maybe just do something that I know right now because that's what I need. There are definitely times to practice. Not every worksheet is horrible and evil. Right. But when you're doing, the way I feel with most worksheets is it's a place to record your information, right? It's a place where you record your answers. Typically, you're not developing a whole lot of understandings and concepts from that sheet. Now, maybe it's a sheet that's giving you a task, but still it's served just to hold that task for you, right? But when you're actually doing something like what you're saying with the knitting, you are developing something that could never be done on a sheet of paper.
Exactly. And then she did, that teacher in particular did such a beautiful job of tying it into service learning.
Yeah.
And so it served a purpose.
Decorated our trees at the school. I loved that.
No,
and
adorable.
The kids loved it. And they were coming during after school or they wanted to spend, not being forced to do that. Mm-hmm. These were students who were like, they wanted to be involved in it. It was, engaging in a good way because they were getting so much out of it and they wanted to be involved in it.
And all genders were drawn to that.
Yeah.
Also
all genders, which is it wasn't exclusive to, it was just everyone embraced it.
And families, do you remember she invited families
yes.
to come? And so those are the things that I'm talking about when I think about what can community building. Yeah, what can parents do? There's so many things that we can do that we're already doing.
Yeah,
Even playing a card game. I'm looking at the Uno cards right now. Just playing a card game, establishing these are the rules of the game, this is how we determine the winner, taking turns, understanding that somebody wins, somebody loses, but then on top of that, there's all this kind of learning that might be happening during a card game or critical thinking or, all of those things that...
you don't get from a sheet.
You don't get from a sheet.
Sheets are, they have their limits and what they can do.
They do.
Yeah.
But then mixing it up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But tapping into what interests children. Like I said, Eliana, my daughter, loves to help me with baking and cooking and everything.
I think that's so awesome.
Where G doesn't. It's not really something that appeals. And so
you got to know the interests of each child or each student, whatever the case is, and I think that really helps you, like you say, to tap into what their interests are and finding those activities that are going to be engaging for them specifically, and that's going to help them grow. And it might not always be because it's academic. I'm talking in purposes of home, because obviously we want what we do in the classroom to pretty much be academic. Yeah. But definitely at home, you need those different areas. Well, Miss Aimee, I thank you so much for coming on to my show. I know that was your time, but I greatly appreciate it. Is there any last piece, last words you want to say, or want to sum it up? Or
I just think that if a school is considering this, take it slowly. Don't expect it to go perfectly the first year by any means. When teachers have concerns, listen to their concerns. Really listen to those concerns, because they're the ones trying to make the most of the time that they're given with their students. But sit down together and have those positive conversations about how we can, take a look at the research, but then move forward in a positive direction that's good for the whole child, not just the academic.
Yeah, good for the whole child. I like that. Great advice, Miss Aimee. Well, once again, thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure.
And that's going to conclude today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed the interview. And I hope that as you start your brand new school year, that you'll reflect on your own homework practices. Again, I don't have all the answers, and I certainly have room to grow in my own homework practices. And the same thing with our school. This is kind of an experiment, and we continue to look at what's happening and make the necessary tweaks and just kind of learn as we go down this path. But I really do think that we need to look at what the research says about homework. We need to look at what we see in our own classrooms. Have we seen homework benefiting our students? Have we seen it not benefit them? Do we see them growing frustrated? How is it affecting them and their time to be children and their playtime and their family time? All of those questions matter, and all of those factors matter. So it is definitely to be continued. We will continue to improve what we do in terms of homework. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.